Hello and welcome to our English news coming to you live from Canal Algérie. First, the top stories of the news. At the request of Algeria, the UN Security Council holds a behind-closed meeting devoted to examine the Zionist threats to bar the UNRWA agency from operating in Gaza. Tonight's history window is devoted to the French attempt to retell the national identity symbolized by the Kachou Mosque and the colonial atrocities in Chad. And the repressive policy against the Moroccan activists goes on with abusive arrests in desperate attempt to stifle their voices. Welcome back to our news. First in our news, and at the request of Algeria, the UN Security Council held behind closed-door meeting devoted to the Zionist threats to bar the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinians Refugees UNRWA from operating in Gaza and the West Bank. The discussions revolved around ways and means of saving the agency that delivers aid to millions of Palestinians, worth recalling that at the request of Algeria and Russia, the UN Security Council is to hold next Thursday a meeting to examine the situation of children in Gaza following the horrible Zionist exactions perpetrated against this frail social segment seriously affected by this devastating war over the past 15 months. And following the eagerly awaited ceasefire in Palestine, due to take effect next Sunday, a new hope looms over Gaza, the inhabitants of which are getting ready to rebuild what has been demolished over the 15 past months, while keeping in mind the great efforts made by Algeria to broker this truce via relentless diplomatic campaign, but also substantial humanitarian aid. Leticia Tqawi explains more.
Much to the joy and relief of Gazans, the long-awaited ceasefire has finally been announced after more than a year of pure horror. Palestinians took to the streets to celebrate the happy news. The displaced who have left the refuge express their attachment to their ground and their determination to hold on to what's rightfully theirs. Another example of resistance and bravery that went down in history is that of the Algerian Revolution.
We convey to our kids the love of the homeland, despite all the challenges. Much like Algeria, who lost 1.5 million martyrs to obtain its independence, it was very inspiring on my end, even if I lost my children during this war. I do not feel the sadness. I hope to see them again in heaven.
Loyal to its principles, Algeria has always stood firm next to Palestine. This was no exception, as Algeria spared no effort in favor of the just cause, notably at the UN Security Council, in addition to sending humanitarian aid, medical missions, and receiving the wounded before the closing of borders.
Algeria deployed and continues to deploy significant material and moral support and send in medical missions and humanitarian aid, in addition to efforts at the Security Council through its support and voting in favor of all initiatives related to the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian people.
Even though the ceasefire was announced, the Zionist occupation is trying to gain time until next Sunday, committing more massacres. More than 80 Palestinians are martyrs and 200 are wounded.
وكان يستنى لحظة وقف إطلاق النار وربنا الصفاء عنده شهيد وهو مصاب في آخر أنفاسه. يا أبو يحيى معك أبو صهيب، يا أبو يحيى أنا صاحبك يا أبو يحيى، قول لا إله إلا الله وأشهد الله إنه نطق بشهادة لا إله إلا الله.
Palestinians are still frightened that the Zionist occupation might breach the agreement at any moment and resume its usual barbarism.
A report on the unfolding situation in Palestine. The UN Security Council, chaired by Algeria, held as well yesterday a meeting devoted to allowing Libya to reinvest its assets. Algeria's permanent representative to the UN, Ammar Benjama, highlighted that the Council would allow the Libyan mission to review all the resolutions adopted in this context and called on the Security Council to back the Libyan people to preserve its territorial integrity and hold free and transparent elections.
And for full respect for Libya's unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. The A3+ stands in solidarity with the Libyan people who have endured tremendous hardship due to miscalculation and hasty decisions made in the past by this august Council. We call on the Council to take responsibility and support the Libyan people in every possible way, in particular by creating a conducive environment to hold free, transparent, and inclusive elections that will enable them to shape a brighter future for their countries.
Ammar Majama speaking from the UN Security Council. And now let's open the history window devoted to the French colonial atrocities. Welcome back. The French colonial atrocities committed against the Algerian people were numerous. To this effect, the mosque of Kachawa at the heart of the El Qasba stands as the best illustration of the attempt meant to uproot the cultural identity of Algeria by turning it into a church after bloody massacres. More insights with Melissa Lila Balaman in this informative report.
At the heart of Algiers' lower Kasbah, the Kachawa Mosque stands as a powerful symbol of resistance against French occupation. Built in 1962 as a beacon of spirituality and knowledge, the mosque became, over the centuries, a silent yet eloquent witness to colonial atrocities and the resilience of the Algerian people, deeply rooted in their identity and faith. After the French invasion in 1830, the colonial authorities embarked on a systematic campaign to erase Islamic identity. 2 years later, in 1832, under the orders of the General Duke of Rovigo, the Kachawa Mosque was turned into a Christian cathedral. Thousands of Algerians, including scholars and worshippers, gathered inside the mosque to peacefully resist the seizure of this sacred place. This peaceful protest was met with brutal repression by colonial forces, who, under the aegis of the General Rovigo, stormed the prayer site, coldly massacring over 4,000 men, women, and children. Hundreds of copies of the Holy Quran were burned and the sacred grounds were desecrated. A few months later, the mosque, now a cathedral, hosted its first Christian mass, an act through which the French occupiers sought to assert their control over the cultural and spiritual identity of the Algerian people. However, the submission attempt failed in the face of the unwavering resilience of the Algerians, determined to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. After independence, the Kachawa Mosque regained its Islamic identity. In November 1962, the first Friday prayer was held there, marking the revival of this sacred site after more than a century of oppression. Today, the Kachawa Mosque remains a place of profound memory, a testament not only to the suffering inflicted by French colonialism, but also the unyielding strength and resistance of the Algerian people in their struggle to preserve their dignity and reclaim their freedom and independence.
We remain with this chapter of history. France's criminal past colonial cannot be erased. Its violent exploitation is not exclusive to Algeria. Heinous crimes like the Cap massacre is on the never-ending list of the atrocities it committed. However, Chadian people never backed down in their fight to snatch independence and get rid of the colonial yoke. Melissa Lila Balaman once again.
The Cap massacre, which occurred on November 15, 1917 in the town of Abéché in Chad, remains one of the most heinous crimes of French colonialism against Muslims. Under the pretense of enthroning Mohammed Dekam as sultan and discussing the country's affairs, the French lured over 400 Muslim scholars and leaders to a meeting. What was supposed to be an honorable gathering turned out to be a trap. Dekam and his deputy were executed, and the invited guests were slaughtered with machetes. days. The bodies of over 400 people were buried in a mass grave in Wad Kamal. This massacre aimed to eradicate Muslims in order to impose French culture and erase Islamic identity. It remains an indelible stain on the history of French colonialism, which is also marked by other crimes such as the burning of the Algiers Library in 1962. They did everything in their power to eliminate local identity and culture. The history of Chadian resistance to French colonization tells of a fierce struggle for freedom and dignity. The leader, Rabih Zubair, then his son Fadlallah, sought to put up an impenetrable barrier against colonial expansion, leading a determined political and armed resistance. After years of intense fighting and heavy losses on both sides, the French eventually extended their domination over northern and southern Chad. However, the people of Wad refused to surrender. Encouraged by their scholars and religious leaders, they courageously defended their culture, faith, and identity. Although 107 years have passed, the pain of that era remains etched in the collective memory of the Chadian people. French colonization marked the beginning of an organized plunder of the country's resources, including gold, uranium, and other natural wealths, which continued for decades. A colonial France, known for its oppression, now boasts a civilizing and diplomatic speech. However, Chad, like the rest of the African continent, rejected this colonial legacy. By reclaiming its independence, it began a relentless struggle to fully free itself from the chains imposed by the colonial past.
And in modern France, some political figures, notably those of the far right, continue to use immigration as scapegoat to the problems facing the country on several fronts. A hatred and division speech marks their approach while the French Republic sinks deeper into a multifaceted crisis. More indications with Laetitia Sadqawi.
A real political cloud hanging over France. The country is increasingly influenced by the far-right rhetoric, with figures like Marine Le Pen scapegoating immigrants for France's deeper economic and social issues, rather than addressing poverty, unemployment, and inequality. These politicians distract from real solutions by blaming immigrants for problems that are far from complex. Anti-immigrant discourse continues to rise, deepening social and economic tensions. In places like Mayotte, immigrants are blamed for social issues, while the underlying structural problems remain ignored. While far-right politicians fuel this narrative, left-wing figures like MP Bastien Lachaud reject the demonization of immigrants, emphasizing their vital contributions to France's economy. Immigrants represent 10% of the population and contribute to 25 billion euros for the economy. Yet, politicians prefer to focus on false claims of cost of immigration. You dare speak about Algeria as if it was a gift to undergo years of occupation and suffering. In reality, it's Algeria-phobia that drives your political agenda. You rely on xenophobia, Islamophobia, and racism in the hope of distracting the popular opinion and to conceal your failure.
Vous attisez la xénophobie, l'islamophobie et le racisme dans l'espoir d'exciter l'opinion publique et de masquer vos échecs.
Meanwhile, France's true fiscal challenges are being overlooked. The country faces an enormous public debt of 3,300 billion euros and a looming 6% deficit. But instead of addressing these issues, many politicians continue to use immigration as a scapegoat. France has not even passed the 2025 budget, highlighting the government dysfunctioning. Indeed, the far right shifts the focus on immigration as a false red flag to distract from the real economic problems at hand. The current political strategy is one of division and fear rather than facing the country's challenges head-on.
We are still watching Canal Algérie. Coming up in our news. The Mughal Qasr or castle, a beautiful architectural jewel to preserve and keep alive our unique ancestral building style. Welcome back to our news. To Morocco now, still facing the aftermath of the Al Hous earthquake, given the daily protests being waged by militants to denounce the miserable living conditions of the quake-stricken people, siding with the militants defending their fair cause. More details in the following report.
يقدر يكون هذا آخر لايف لي إلا تعتقلت ومشيت للحبس ما كيهمني.
Said Ait al-Mahdi was aware that he would be arrested by the Moroccan authorities, so he left his last message before being put in jail. Said Ait al-Mahdi is the head of the association bringing together those people victimized by Al Hous earthquake. He actively struggled to make their voice be heard and conveyed their demand to the authorities.
رجل يدافع عن المصلحة العامة وليست له أي خصومة وأي مشاكل مع أي جهة، وأن ما كان يقوم به كان يهدف من ورائه إلى تحسيس المسؤولين بمعاناة وبمشاكل ومحنة الناس المتضررين من الزلزال.
His brave struggle was meant to serve the general interests of the quake-stricken people, but mainly to denounce the aid that never reached the area. Said Ait al-Mahdi is not the sole militant for this cause. There are other activists who spare no effort to denounce this desperate strategy meant to silence people and deter them from their most basic rights.
ونادوا اعتقلوا ما اعتقلوش يديونا احنا كاملين يحبسونا احنا كاملين ما يدوش لنا ساعة وحدة.
People are determined to carry on their legitimate struggle, and the Makhzen regime is in dire straits to deal with this serious case, still causing headache for the Moroccan officialdom. To developments now, the Trans-Saharan Road is now a reality, a strategic project for the continent that promises to open up the southern regions and to connect the main economic axes and reinforce commercial exchanges, a new milestone in the framework of the Continental Free Trade Zone.
The project to achieve the Trans-Saharan Road is finally achieved. On a distance of 2,320 kilometers, this artery will connect the sub-Saharan Africa to the Mediterranean basin while ensuring connections with several countries in the south. It will also allow significant trade between Europe, the Maghreb and sub-Saharan Africa. We are proud of this important infrastructure. From now on, the transport of all cargoes of goods will be done through this artery. This will only strengthen economic exchanges. The Trans-Saharan Road is entirely paved, thus ensuring smooth and secure traffic. It offers significant opportunities for over 200 million people spread over 6 million square kilometers in Africa. It provides direct access to the Mediterranean, to Chad, Niger and Mali, reducing the costs and transit, the merchandise and facilitating international trade. We are working to develop this project to ensure the safety of users of this artery. This Trans-Saharan Road symbolizes the unity and African integration and is an ambitious project for Algeria. It constitutes a strategic crossroads connecting the two main geostrategic axes of the continent, Algiers, Lagos, Dakar and Djibouti.
Let's embark now to the Sahara region to discover the Mughal Qasr or castle, a unique site that has to be preserved at all costs to keep alive the ancestral architecture still admired by visitors, be they nationals or foreigners. Let's discover more with Melissa Lila Balaman.
The Qasr of Mughal is one of the most beautiful historical sites in the Sahara region. For historical landmarks lovers, it is a destination worth exploring. Located 52 kilometers northeast of Bashar, Mughal warmly welcomes visitors with its cool climate and stunning landscapes. The Qasr of Mughal was built over 8 centuries ago. While it is neither the first nor the only one of its kind, many other similar sites have sadly crumbled into ruins. The Qasr has 2 main gates. The first, located at the top, is designated for visitors, residents and their animals. The second, which leads to the palm grove and water source, is prohibited to animals to prevent contamination. The palm grove was once abundant with crops and agriculture was a vital source of life for the inhabitants. The monument consists of several narrow alleys, each containing multiple dwellings. The ground floor of these homes was used for storing food and supplies. The first floor served as living quarters, and the second floor was designated for animals. Each of the 8 alleys had its own well to meet the needs of nearby residents. At the old mosque of the Qasr, a large well provided water for ablutions and drinking. At the heart of Dakhsar lies a square that served as a gathering place for meetings, weddings, and other communal activities. A sundial located here was used to manage water distribution for agriculture. In recent years, parts of Dakhsar, such as the square and facade, have undergone restoration. Unfortunately, the interior has suffered deterioration. Some tourists and visitors have defaced this historical treasure with write-ins and graffiti. Additionally, natural phenomena such as recent severe weather have caused the collapse of several narrow walls. It is essential for civil society and the local population to come together to preserve this cultural and historical heritage. Visitors to this beautiful site leave with fond memories of the place and the hospitality of its inhabitants.
The Mughal Qasr, our castle, was the last feature story in our news. Tomorrow, another day, other news. Keep tuning to Al Shal. Take care and bye-bye for now.